Welcome in to the Inside Carolina podcast presented to you by Johnny TShirt and JohnnyTShirt.com. These are our positional previews. We're going to do a bunch of these throughout the summer, June and July, to preview the different position groups for UNC football heading into the 2021 season. We're starting off with quarterbacks. Joining me is Greg Barnes and Jason Staples with Inside Carolina. We're going to go right through the quarterback depth chart and then bounce around different questions and conversations on that position group. We're going to start out Sam Howell, Jacoby Criswell, Drake May, and Jefferson Boaz. Those are the 4 scholarship quarterbacks for UNC. Obviously, Sam Howell's a starter, junior season, looking to be in the Heisman contention in 2021. You've got a kind of a competition for the backup position with Jacoby and Drake. Drake, the incoming freshman, his true freshman season arrived in January. And, of course, Jefferson Boaz is probably the 4th string quarterback, but staying at quarterback, confirmed through a source that Jefferson will be a quarterback this season. And I thought he showed some things in the spring game. So with Sam Howell, what can he improve on? What can he get better on? How can he fine tune his skills and talents heading into the season? And then what's going on at backup for UNC as the competition goes from Jacoby and Drake into the offseason and into preseason training camp. Greg, what's your general take on what Sam can improve on? And then we'll get into the backup situation.
Well, I really think the main thing for Sam is the fact that he's been sacked 70 times in his UNC career. So about 35 a year. That's too many. And when you look at what Phil Longo wants to do, he really utilizes that vertical passing game. And so with it brings situations where Sam's trying to give those wide receivers on the outside time to get open. He's also got that gunslinger mentality, which has been very beneficial for him. And it's one thing I talked to Mac Brown about this spring is how do you balance that? How do you say, okay, you've got to be smarter with the ball. You've got to be able to get rid of the ball so it doesn't cost us, but you also don't want to neuter that willingness and that desire to make the big play. And so that's one of the things he's having to work on. That's been the focus point for him. And I think you'll see a lot of improvement there. As we saw last year, he's more comfortable now using his feet. That should help. And I think the other thing is that he really spent this offseason focused on NFL coverages.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to help him at the college game as well, being able to understand, watching him in 3 scrimmages this spring. I mean, he was lights out. He knew where he wanted to go with it. I was just very impressed with everything that I saw out of him. So I do expect him to take an even more of a step forward. I know that may be hard for people to believe, but I think he's that kind of talent.
For those who don't know, Phil Longo, UNC's offensive coordinator, goes through NFL coverages with Sam Howell. Has been doing that for a while now. They ramped that up during COVID and then during this offseason, literally going through each NFL team, picking out the most difficult and different coverages that he'll see in the NFL and working with him on that. In terms of improvement, also know that flexibility has been a big thing, just becoming more flexible, more versatile, more mobile to help him become more of a mobile quarterback. And then the fine tuning of just decision making, like Greg said, being able to make the right decisions at the right time. Jason, what do you think are the areas that you think Sam can improve on and he will improve on heading into 2021?
Well, I mean, I think Greg basically said most of what I would say in all of this. I mean, the biggest thing really is learning to live to see another play in terms of not getting sacked when, you see some pressure coming or that maybe if you hold on a little bit of an extra beat, you might get a big play, but you're taking a risk of giving up a negative play in the backfield. I think that is really where the best progress can be made, and it needs to be made in terms of getting the ball out to your check down, being willing to do that a little bit more frequently, rather than holding out for some of the big stuff downfield. So that's a little bit of a trade-off. I mean, the benefit is that sometimes he does pull off some of those big plays downfield by holding onto it. So you don't want to eliminate that completely, but you want him, and it's less about coverage for him. To me, the other big thing is recognition of pressure and where the pressure is coming from. So when you see this front and, this coverage appears to be what you're getting behind it in the pre-snap, and then this changes on, the immediate post-snap, then you must have pressure coming from here. There are times where he's not always recognized the pressure quickly enough that there's gonna be pressure from this spot, and a few other times where maybe offensive line or a back or somebody or someone's a little bit slower in the block. He needs to feel pressure a little bit quicker sometimes. These are things that you talk about really nitpicking. That's nitpicking
Yeah.
stuff, but I think that's really where he can take the biggest leap forward uh, is understanding where pressure is going to come from, recognizing it quickly, and then making that very, very quick decision of, okay, I got to get this out now, whether that's an incompletion, throw it away, or get it to, immediately get it to my underneath check down, these sort of hots that you have built in more quickly. That to me is is really the space for him to improve the most in. And I think he's going to be tested a little bit more in terms of some of the stuff downfield, because last year, you did have certain situations where you just knew that he was going to have a guy that was going to win downfield on some of the verticals. And with a little bit more unproven overall wide receiver group, he's going to have to make sure that he is a bit more consistent in terms of knowing where certain plays are going to be made. It's going to require more of him than knowing that Brown is just going to be able to go up and get that. Although again, Bo Corrales may become one of those guys this year. There are a few guys that could become that. So that's the other thing, is just knowing that he's going to have less of the veteran presence out there. That's going to require more of him as well. But those things are the things for me that you have to look at with Howell.
Yeah, Ross, to illustrate Jason's point about the pressure and how Sam has made significant strides already. Just looking at the Pro Football Focus data, if you go back to 2019, of course, Sam's freshman year, under pressure, he completed 42% of his passes, 7 yards per attempt, which is not very good, with 8 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And if you fast forward to 2020 last year, he upped his completion percentage to 54%, averaged 11.7 yards per attempt, which is really good, and then had 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So while you may not see that big of a jump that he had from freshman to sophomore year, I still think you'll see a continued improvement because, and you look at what he did when he was blitzed last year. I mean, his numbers were just phenomenal. 13 touchdowns, 1 interception. So that bodes well for his improvement.
That kills defensive coordinators when they bring the blitz and then get killed deep. I think there's a couple different interesting kind of storylines to follow with Sam. He's going to have all the attention this year. I mean, all the preseason stuff. Trevor Lawrence is gone. It's the Sam Howell show in terms of like the guy in the ACC. So, leading up to the season, he's going to win all the awards, all the preseason awards. He's on the Heisman list. I think he's like a top 3 in terms of odds to win the Heisman. So the outside focus is going to be more than it's been in the last 2 seasons. First season was a rookie, not much pressure. Second season, a little bit more pressure, a little more expectations. This year, I mean, he is the guy, and he's going to have a lot of national eyes on him, a lot of draft nicks coming after him and things like that. So that'll be interesting to see how he handles that. I think he's kind of made for that. I think he can handle the pressure. And then I think leadership is going to be a big thing. He's got a little bit younger team. He doesn't have Diami, doesn't have Daz Newsome, doesn't have Michael Carter and Javonte Williams. And those are 4 superstars on offense. So he's going to have to be more of a leader in the room. And I think that's something he's certainly working on, and bringing on these younger receivers, bringing on these younger running backs. And I'll be interested to see how his production and the offense production changes this season with, less talent at both those positions. I think there's enough talent to get things done. I think Ty Chandler is important. I think Josh Downs will have an incredible season, but it'll be interesting to see how guys like Bo Corrales, Antoine Green, Joffrey Brown, those wide receivers step in and fulfill the production that's now in the NFL. Jason, what do you think about that, about how younger players are going to be able to step into? They have the talent to kind of get what they've done last year, done this year?
Yeah, I don't think there's any absence of talent in the wide receiver room at all. I mean, you start looking at this. I mean, I thought even last year, the most talented wide receiver on the roster was probably Antoine Green. And, he's a guy that's not been able to stay healthy. There's been some toughness questions on some of this, but I mean, the talent's not the problem. same thing with some of the, or similar things with some of the other guys. I mean, you look at Josh Downs at this point, I think it's hard to argue that he's not the most talented guy in the room, based on what we saw last year and in the spring at the slot position. And he's a good bit more talented than what you had at that spot last year. And they were really good at that spot last year. But he's also he's going to be in his first year of real experience. So the problem is not talent. You've got Downs, Green, Corrales, Joffrey Brown. I mean, he's the fastest guy on the roster. You could see the talent last year when he was on the field. I mean, it's there. Mm-hmm. The problem is the combination of, some of the question marks that have kept some of those guys off the field a little bit more. Like I said, with Green, with some of the toughness and also some of the injury issues, and then just a lack of experience and consistency that comes with experience. Because when you have more experience, you become more consistent over time, or you end up working your way off the field. Right now, you got a bunch of guys who they're going to have to figure out how to gel. They're going to have to get on the same page and know that, this guy is going to be at this spot, and know that, when you see this coverage change, then the grass is going to be here and you've got to be in that spot. Those are the little things. And in Longo's offense, he's putting a lot on the wide receivers to be able to get to grass, to get to open field so that the quarterback can hit them. There's a lot of little adjustments that have to be made. That's one of the things I found kind of funny about the pre-draft analyses of De'Ami Brown last year as well. He didn't run very much in the way of routes in that offense. He only ran, 3 or 4 routes. Well, that's true. But the routes that he ran in Longo's offense also required him to make a lot of little micro adjustments as he was running these routes, and to, do a lot of reading on the fly. And that's NFL level stuff. There's a lot of requirements that are done, especially in the slot in Longo's offense, for how different things are run against different coverages. So those are things that these guys are going to have to prove that they can do that. These guys are going to have to prove that they can be consistent with that and make sure that they're on the same page with Sam on that. And that's where, again, that's going to put more on Sam to make sure that he's taking those guys aside in practice or wherever, and making sure that they know exactly, like, here's where I expect you to be. I will put it there if you're there. And you have to be there because I'm going to be letting it fly before you're there. You have to get to where Howell has their trust to the point where he can release it before they're open. And they're not there yet. It's just going to take a little bit of time. But again, the talent is not the issue. I mean, you go down the list and there's guys that can play
for sure,
that have the ability. Will they be able to get there?
Greg, Heisman season. Have you ever covered a guy that's just going to be this favored to be in the running, and like, what are you kind of expecting? I'm kind of excited to kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, I would say Jason knows a little bit about that with Jameis. No, I mean, in 2016, Trubisky, I guess 3 or 4 games in, darted up the boards. And so we had maybe a month there where he was a legitimate Heisman candidate, but that's really it. Nothing, he wasn't like that going into the season. So that's going to be very interesting.
And it's all about winning, right? It's all about, they have to keep winning.
Yeah. And I actually, this morning, a new list came out, and I actually sent it to Jason, if I can find it. But it had 5 quarterbacks as the favorites to win the Heisman, and Sam Howell was not on it. But you're looking at guys like Bryce Young, Spencer Rattler, guys that play for teams like Bama and Ohio State and Oklahoma, Georgia, JT Daniels, DJ Uiagalelei. Guys that are playing for teams that are expected to make the college football playoff. And I think that's the connection that's very important. So for Sam to have a legitimate chance at winning that, Carolina's going to have to be really, really good and not only meet expectations, surpass expectations.
Yeah, and win the big games and keep a pretty clean record. I think up until they got Miami and they have Notre Dame are going to be the 2 games and get a lot of national attention. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to talk about backup quarterbacks briefly and get out of here. First one talks about Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com, your one-stop shop for everything UNC related and UNC apparel, right on Franklin Street. And, of course, online at JohnnyT-Shirt.com. For Inside Carolina premium subscribers, use the 10% off discount code to get 10% off. all your order. You got Father's Day coming up. You got all the birthdays and holidays in the summer. Get all your gear for the football season, for tailgating, for home tailgating, all that good stuff. Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyTShirt.com. Local, alumni owned, and we want to, of course, support them. Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyTShirt.com. All right, guys, backup quarterbacks. Before we get out of here on the quarterback position preview, we got Jacoby Criswell entering his second year. You know, his first spring was last April, so he was only one spring in, but a full season. And then Drake May, the kind of 24/7 Sports 5-star guy, the stud out of Myers Park High School in Charlotte. They were competing this spring, and that will continue to rage into preseason camp. Greg, you saw both them a lot this spring. We got a chance to watch them, I think, 3 or 4 times in Keene Stadium. What was your general takeaway about each guy? And we'll go briefly into kind of the dynamics of a backup quarterback competition.
Well, I think the key thing for people to understand is that Drake May is basically a high school senior at this point in time. And the way that Phil Longo wanted to handle him this spring is say, look, there's time for competition to come. We'll do that in training camp. For now, you just have to learn the offense. And I think that's kind of a key component of what he brings in terms of we don't know yet, just because he's kind of working through the steps. A lot of potential. He's got a big arm for sure. I think he surprised a lot of people with how mobile he was. He looked really good in all 3 scrimmages running the ball. And I think Jacoby Criswell, while we didn't see it in the spring game, the first 2 scrimmages that we were able to watch, he stood out to me as clearly the number 2 guy. And just kind of knew what he's supposed to be doing, which is to be expected. He's been around a little bit longer than Drake, but very solid, good with his feet, has a pretty good arm. I think North Carolina's in good shape with both of these guys, but I do think Criswell right now is probably the leading candidate for that backup spot, which is what you would expect. And we'll have to see how quickly Drake can come on to make that a true competition, not the backup.
Yeah, what I've heard about Drake is the staff was pretty impressed with how mobile he was at his size, and very athletic family. So nothing too surprising there. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Criswell has the lead and will likely be the backup. What's even more interesting is what happens next spring, 2022, when that competition opens up to be the starter. Jason, backup quarterback competitions. What's the dynamic there? What do you think is going on in their heads leading into the fall? And the mentality those 2 guys take, knowing they're not the guy this year, knowing they might get some reps in mop-up duty, and then kind of looking ahead to next year, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is they're just trying to put themselves in the best possible position to be there when Sam is not. I mean, that's what you're trying to do. And the first thing is that the coaching staff is going to repeat this to them all the time, is that you're 1 snap away, so you better be ready no matter what, because you just never know. And that's where Criswell in particular, he's going to know that he needs to be preparing as though he's the starter, even though he knows he's not. And he knows now, having seen what May's capable of, that he needs to really show that he's capable of running the show in order to hold May off in the future. So, and May on the other hand is basically coming in, like Greg said, he's basically a high school senior, and he's just trying to show that he can play at this level. That's what you're trying to do. I can develop here, and I can play. I want to prove myself. That's how they're going to be thinking. And I just don't expect a whole lot from the backup quarterback position this year. As long as Howell stays healthy, that's going to be that's going to be the position. And those guys are basically, if they come in the game, they're going to be handing it off a bunch. But they need to show a lot of development in practice, and they need to be ready to go next year. And there's little things that they'll be cleaning up. I know that with May, he's going to have to clean up a lot of the footwork stuff and make sure that he's more consistent with how he's delivering the ball. A lot of things are impressive, but just little fundamental stuff is going to have to come along. They're going to be fine though. And I think again, the key is to make sure that they're motivated, knowing who they're behind, and that they can learn from him in the film room and on the field each day at practice. And from there, you just kind of prepare for the handoff after the year.
Awesome. Good stuff. Anything else from y'all? We'll get out of here on quarterbacks. Good to go. All right, guys. Appreciate y'all listening. This is the first of many position previews in June and July. We'll hit up running backs, wide receivers, and offensive line before moving on to the defense in July. Thanks for listening.